the election temperature is fever pitch across the length and breadth of these 166 square miles as the political parties leave nothing to chance now, just 11 days now to go before Barbados votes. To say that it's the mother of all election battles is an understatement, and as it happens, it is Mother's Day, so happy Mother's Day to the mothers watching this. And we have our eyes on every bit of the children, the election candidates, and what they will say. For this is BT's Election Watch. I'm Julius Gittens. For the next 30 minutes, we'll analyze the happenings on the road to Parliament. With me, political scientist and lecturer at the University of the West Indies, Dr. Kristina Hinds. Welcome to the program. Happy Mother's Day to you.
Thank you very much.
And the veteran journalist, the man who's as long in the tooth as I am, looking at elections past, Dean St. Hill, welcome.
A pleasure, Julius.
And let me begin now by asking you both to look back on the week that was first up before we look ahead to this second week of the election campaign. The good, the bad, and the ugly. Let me start with you, Kristina. What resonated with you, not merely as a political scientist, but as a voter? What stood out for you as in that spectrum of good, bad, and ugly?
Okay. In terms of the good, I thought that the launch of the BLP's campaign was really immaculate. It was well presented, managed. I thought it was clear. It was a very impressive launch. And this is not to say anything bad about the DLP's launch, but just that it was a very beautiful thing to watch. And I am not affiliated with any political party. In terms of the bad, or could I go with the ugly first? I thought that the really ugly were some of the comments made at the DLP's launch, the following day, the Sunday, about Mia Mottley in particular, not because they were about Mia Mottley, but because of some of the messages they sent about how politicians can speak about women on political platforms. And in particular, some of the comments made by Steve Blackett, who is the Minister of Social Care. That ministry includes the Gender Bureau. I thought that was very unfortunate for someone who I believe really should have known better, in particular because of his role in the Gender Bureau.
Okay, so that's ugly.
Yeah, that was very ugly to me.
And what about bad? Or is there no room for bad? No.
Things that were just bad, I can't really comment. I mean, sometimes there were not clear discussions on particular issues, and I think this was from both sides. On the one hand, from the Democratic Labour Party, there was no clear discussion of what it is they intend to do over the next 5 years. From the Barbados Labour Party, I think there were also no answers given to some of the questions raised on the BLP platform. The most important of these, in my opinion, was about how the BLP campaign was being financed. And I think that is a very important question for us to ask about political party financing in general, not just the Barbados Labour Party.
So, personality contest then, writ large, Dean St. Hill, that's really what it was this past week?
Yeah, I think this past week was an interesting one in the political life of Barbados. My short answer is probably, I concur pretty much with what's been said.
So her good, bad, and ugly, or your good, bad, and ugly?
Yeah, pretty much. I would say, though, that for me, the good was actually what I would call the machinery of the Barbados Labour Party, in that, I mean, the launch was absolutely amazing is probably one word that you could use. But then it's almost like, the other manifesto launch was perhaps equal to it. So you got that sense that it wasn't just a sort of a one-off event, but that this is, a train and it's on track and it's just, headed down the road. For me, the bad probably, to some extent, just the lack of issues to some extent on the part of the DLP's campaign. I think that they need to get to that place of whether it's defending their record or whether it's putting some new stuff on the table, but they need to get there pretty quickly. And pretty much the ugly was just that to some extent, very unnecessary and very strategically questionable assault, as it were, on the leader of the opposition.
We're going to come back to this whole question of the attack versus defense. But I want to just look at the campaigns, the launch of the BLP's mini manifesto, building the best Barbados together. Let's go through some of the measures, and we'll come back to some of those highlights that we spoke of just now. Some of these measures include a pledge to reprofile Barbados's high debt. So that's simply extending debt payments to allow for a longer time to repay the loans. And the government the government in waiting, as we often call our opposition parties, is saying that they will have access to $500 million as a result of that particular measure of renegotiating loans to be able to spend, because of $500 million in interest, that's what's being paid right now. Actually, it's closer to 800 million. The Barbados Labour Party is promising to rebuild the foreign reserves to 15 weeks of import cover. And we can argue about how the Barbados Labour Party would do that if elected to office. The plans to abolish, and this is the other part, this is on the revenue side, to get rid of the National Social Responsibility Levy, and also the road tax, which has been around since the 1930s by last count, to be replaced by a progressive tax, what they consider a more equitable tax on oil imports. The VAT will go back to 15% within 18 months. And then there's the cost of living allowance for civil servants. So there will be a COLA, as it's called in other countries, tacking on for allowing for inflation. That is if a Barbados Labour Party government fails to reach agreement on a new wage bill for civil servants with the trade unions. Now, some of these measures no doubt may resonate with an electorate that has seen Barbados go through a raft of tough times and credit downgrades recently, and many of them have been crying out for relief, particularly from the issue of taxes. But then the question remains, if you get rid of these taxes, what will pay Barbados's way? And that's where the opponents of Mia Mottley come in, and the critics as well, such as the noted economist Professor Michael Howard, who says it's simply not workable. Well, the BLP has, as the saying goes, some explaining to do. Here's Mia Mottley trying to do just that last night.
All the ministries, the police, the nurses in the polyclinic, not the ones in the hospital, that comes up to 780 odd million. But the interest, not the principal. You know about interest, governments pay interest to the bank and the credit union all the time. The interest alone for government's debt is $790 million. Now tell me, which one of you will continue to have a situation you're earning $1,500 a month, your interest and principal is $1,000, your rent is $600, you're in trouble already. You ain't buy food, you ain't pay light, you ain't pay water. The first thing you're going to do is go to the credit union or the bank and say, look, I owe this $1,000 a month for the next 2 years. But if I don't pay the rent, and if I don't buy food, I can't live and I won't got nowhere to live. So see me, if you could, I don't mind paying you $500 a month for the next 5 years, because it would leave me with the $600 to pay the rent, it would leave me with the $100 to pay the light, $50 for the water, and at least another $350 to buy food to support me and the family. That don't make sense? If it is good enough for you, how can a government ignore it? For the last 4 years, every single body, including David Eswick, who has now found back a voice, has told them, you need to reprofile your debt. You need to bring down the interest costs, because if we're spending all that money in interest, We ain't got no money left to buy drugs for the hospital. We ain't got no money left to buy food for school meals. We ain't even got no money left to feed the people up at the prison.
So, me and Motley, they're trying to break it down as if running a country and running a family are the same. Indeed, they are not. They're two very different things. Any macroeconomist would tell you that. But still, very basic breaking down. We are spending a lot of our money, a huge chunk of our money, not paying salaries, but paying on interest, on debt servicing. And that argument was clearly made. Of the $4.5 billion that the government gets to spend, a big chunk of that goes in interest. By me and Motley's reckoning, nearly $800 million. Let's talk a bit about that. You're getting rid of the NSRL, a tax which has not been popular with Barbadians. You're getting rid of the road tax, which I don't think any driver in Barbados would quarrel with because they have to fork out huge chunks of cash every year. But you're going to have a flatter tax, and almost like a VAT, if you will, a progressive tax on petroleum imports. And then at the same time, the VAT, which was supposed to be a temporary measure at 17.5%, is to go back to 15% under a BLP regime. How really workable is that in the context of Barbados finding it really difficult to pay its way and recover from economic doldrums? First you, Dean St. Hill.
Okay, so I think the thing for me is it's very difficult to say whether, in a sense, it's workable or not. The real question becomes, is it in the minds of Barbadians workable or not? And I think that, what I see in terms of Mia Motley's presentation quite often is that simplification of these grand matters of state into that simple working of, this is what your family does. This is what you do as the head of your household. This is basically nothing more than what we are going to do as a government. Right. We're talking 4.5 billion. You may be talking, 4.5 thousand or something. Right. But the basic point is that I think she has that ability. And it really contrasts, I think, quite starkly against certainly the DLP leader, who tends not to be able to just simplify things, use simple language.
There's a danger of oversimplification, you would admit.
There is, absolutely. But I think that so far she's probably been able to perhaps get that sort of balance. As I've heard her generally, it really becomes a message that, you may not be an economist, right, and these are no doubt complex issues, but you get that you understand in a basic way what she's talking about. I think that's important.
That's the point, Kristina. Hinds, that there are more grannies in Silver Hill who vote than there are political scientists or economists. So whether it resonates with Michael Howard or not, doesn't matter. People can relate to their own situation and look at the country and extrapolate and come to their conclusions.
Yeah, sure. What I would say is that I don't think these things are impossible, altogether impossible. But you would really have to see the details of some of these plans and proposals. Some of this is very dependent on the financial institutions that have lent money to Barbados, because if we use the same simplification that Ms. Motley gave, if you yourself go into the bank and say, look, I'm facing some difficulties, I need to have more time to pay and at lower levels, it is up to that financial institution to say, okay, that's fine. So there's a negotiation process that has to occur there that will allow this to be possible on the one hand. And I think if some of the financial institutions are not as willing, this is where the discussion of the International Monetary Fund comes in. There's kind of been this disconnection between this language of reprofiling the debt and going to the International Monetary Fund. And this is one of the options to help address the interest payments on the one hand, while also paying civil servants comfortably. The other thing I would say, though, is that I think the logic that the Barbados Labour Party is using is that in reducing taxes, they will help to stimulate economic activity, and in so doing, they will then be able to collect more revenue than having high tax levels that stifle the economy and are therefore counterproductive. So I think that is the idea in there, but as I said, the details will be very important. And I actually think the thing about road tax will end up being more costly to us as individuals, because each time you go to the fuel pump to fill up, you're going to have to pay that tax. And I think, although the idea is that people may not feel this at one time, I think it may also be a very inequitable tax, because people who drive older vehicles, who may be at the lower end of the income strata, definitely. And they will go to the pump more often than somebody who has a hybrid, an expensive vehicle, somebody that has a new vehicle that is very, or
who will pay no tax.
Exactly. Somebody who has a very fuel efficient vehicle too, that may go to the gas station once every 2 weeks,
so
as opposed to others.
It's just a good old political sweet meat, so that the voters say, yeah, get rid of road tax. That sounds good to me, but really not something that a political party is really seriously interested in implementing in 2018, because it's not exactly like the VAT, the value-added tax, was brought on to get rid of the raft of duties and so on, indirect taxation. And that was a success. But in respect of a petroleum tax, really, could something like that, given the fact that the polluters will be paying, and polluters who own older cars tend to be towards the lower end of the economic strata.
I honestly, I don't think that the Barbados Labour Party is going to put it into the manifesto and essentially not do it. I think, for example...
Oh, come now. The campaign manifestos of both political parties are rife with all sorts of promises, never to see the light of day in legislation.
I don't know. I think that, I would say that, I have not necessarily seen that, certainly on the part of the Barbados Labour Party. In great detail. Typically, in fact, the Barbados Labour Party, at the end of each 5 years, for example, does that report, promises and performance, or whatever they call it. I think it contrasts, again, fairly starkly with the Democratic Labour Party that says, it's not a social contract, or whatever language they use.
It's not an economy, it's a society.
And it's not, no. So I don't think, in other words, I don't think that either political party, particularly in this particular campaign, is just putting stuff out there, floating kites, flying kites, whatever, as the case may be. I think that it's, to some extent, an innovation in terms of how we approach the taxation issue. So I don't think that it's something that you're going to see them walk away from. I think the intention is to get rid of the NSRL and do all those things.
In case you have been held up in Harrison's Cave for the last 5 years, I have to let you know that there are other political parties. It's been a record number of political parties: Solutions Barbados, United Progressive Party, and some other fringe parties, as some might call them. But they are out there, and they are claiming your attention. And a record number of independent candidates also are in the mix. So I have to mention that this is not really a two-horse race. And therefore, let me bring to your attention, for your entertainment, education, and edification, then the United Progressive Party, which launched its creative economy yesterday. It rubbished the Barbados Labour Party, as we were just discussing, and its manifesto as mere gimmicks. The UPP's leader, Lynette Eastman, says that the party's first plan is to cut corruption. And I'll have more on their argument on the economy when we come back.
One winner, only one team can deliver. Balanced, comprehensive, unrivaled coverage. Barbados Today, Capital Media HD 99.3, and 6 Gear Studios. Don't miss election night on www.facebook.com/Barbados Today, on www.barbadostoday.bb, live on www.capitalmediahd.com, and on www.facebook.com/Capital Media HD.
This is BT's Election Watch. Now, just before the break, I thought I'd tell you about what the United Progressive Party has been pitching to the voters. They have no choice of red or blue, so they picked orange, and that's their color. And the UPP's leader, Lynette Eastman, has been saying that in a country that is ailing economically, the crisis, of course, on the South Coast with sewage and so on, that a creative economy is the answer to those ills, but also, first on their list, getting rid of corruption. Quick scan of my guests, Kristina Harrison and Dean St. Hill. Can the UPP really grab the attention of voters by saying, let's go after corruption? Because corruption does drain a country of its capacity to pay its way and to do the things it wants to do. That is a fact. But is that the kind of message that voters will resonate?
I'll probably be a little bit controversial and say that I don't think they have the credibility to basically put corruption on the table, in the sense that they haven't had the reins of government. So they almost speak from it almost as outsiders. I think the persons who can best address it are in fact those persons who have in some way been involved in functioning within government. And you just have to have you have to have the mass and the size. You have to have the ability to actually have the reins of government. I mean, in real terms, in order to put it on the table as something that you can fix. You can, as a pressure group, say it's something that's important that we'd like to discuss. So will there be a discussion? Absolutely. And I certainly hope that there will be. But I don't think that the UPP can fly on this as an issue. I really don't.
Okay, Kristina Hinds, the leader of the UPP, has had skin in the game as a former Minister of Commerce, Consumer Affairs and Business Development and Director of International Business. So her counter-argument would be, I know a thing or two about corruption or the importance of dealing with it as an economic issue.
I agree. I think corruption is definitely an issue that needs to be addressed. I think we should be a little bit careful in how we speak about corruption as well, because yes, there is some impropriety in government, there's some improper behavior, but I do not think Barbados is anywhere near a corrupt country. I mean, there are some things that need to be corrected, but corruption is not the problem in Barbados. This is not something that the UPP is alone in pointing out, because even in the BLP's manifesto, they have listed corruption. There will be zero tolerance for corruption. There are many manifesto points. So clearly, this is something of some significance that needs to be discussed, and the UPP is correct in bringing it up. Solutions Barbados has also brought it up as a significant issue because it's a wastage problem. You know, when there is money that is being siphoned off in some area, even if it's a little bit, those are resources that could be used to serve the community.
So Lynette Eastman also promised greater entrepreneurship growth, insisting that the creative economy was the next big sector for growing Barbados' economy, and she wants to cut the island's over $500 million energy bill by upping the ante in expanding renewables. She wants to cut the high food import bill, as you heard, putting greater emphasis on growing our own way and revamping some aspects of manufacturing. Here's Lynette Eastman on the stump.
We are saying that we are going to set up a creative economy where everybody can benefit. All young, Millennium Heights, Marl Hall, New Orleans, King Street, King William Street, wherever it is, Dunlow Lane. All of these young people, all people and people of whatever age that are creatives will be able to benefit. That is the new sector, worth some $3 billion in our estimation, but we know that there are things that we must cut too. We're going to cut the food import bill. Agriculture is critical to the United Progressive Party. We believe in agriculture at the macro level. All of these acres of land that now is in the possession of government, that is in bush, we will make sure that we cultivate those. But we are also saying that Barbadians have to start growing what they eat around their homes, like how we used to in the past.
Lynette Eastman there. Well, in the remaining moments, we can break some news to you as the Caribbean Court of Justice, this nation's highest court, has ruled on the case of the university professor and his right to vote in the upcoming general election as a Commonwealth citizen. All that after the break.
One night, one winner. Only one team can deliver. Balance, comprehensive, unrivaled coverage. Barbados Today, Capital Media HD 99.3, and 6 Gear Studios. Don't miss election night on www.facebook.com/Barbados Today, on www.barbadostoday.bb, live on www.capitalmediahd.com, and on www.facebook.com/Capital Media HD.
On BT's Election Watch, breaking news out of Port of Spain. The Caribbean Court of Justice has ruled this day that the St. Lucia-born academic Eddy Ventose should be registered as an elector in the May 24th poll. And the court issued a warning to the Chief Elections Officer that failing to carry out its order by midday, Monday, May 14th, could land her in jail for contempt of court. So this news just coming to hand from Port of Spain, this unprecedented hearing on an unprecedented case that the CCJ has heard, in which Eddy Ventose, who is a professor of law at the KFL campus of the University of the West Indies, has, and I'm quoting now, satisfied the necessary legal and regulatory conditions for registration as an elector. This ruling by the 5-member panel of judges led by the Chief Justice, the President of the Court, Sir Dennis Byron, ordering Angela Taylor, the Chief Electoral Officer, to not, you might, you must, you ought to, shall, and that in legal terms for any lawyer is a big word. Shall means you must register or cause the applicant, this being Eddy Ventose, to be registered as an elector before 12 noon on Monday, the 14th day of May, 2018. So Dennis in the ruling said that if the Chief Elections Officer does not comply with the order, and I'm quoting, you may be held to be in contempt of court and you may be imprisoned and or fined. This as the many Commonwealth citizens have complained that they have not been able to register to vote in the upcoming general election. Quick comment on this breaking news from Kristina Hinds and Dean St. Hill. I'll begin with you, Kristina.
I think that the ruling makes sense. This is what pertained in Barbados previously, so I'm not quite sure why it became an issue during the run-up to this election, and I hope that all of those who need to be registered can do so in a very timely manner. The election is 11 days away. So,
Dean St. Hill, the complaints already being made about discrepancies in the voters list, and the Electoral and Boundaries Commission says it's working to clean that up, and now they have to go ahead and register any and all Commonwealth citizens who meet the test to vote in the general election with 11 days to go.
Yeah, well, again, for me, I don't understand what was the expected, let's say, result in terms of the Electoral and Boundaries Commission, because it's written so clearly. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but to me, it's so clearly written and entrenched into the Constitution that you'd think that this is the logical result. And therefore, what is the game? What is the expected result? What is the anticipation? Because it makes really both the Electoral and Boundaries Commission and, quite frankly, the government, by extension, look pretty incompetent. That's really what it does. And the warning that, this person could be imprisoned, I don't know, let's say, the mechanism by which it could be done. But the point is that it looks pretty, but it looks like a really harsh, in other words, that adds to the harshness, as it were, just for not so much for the legal people, but for the average people. It makes it look like a really big ruling, if you will.
Well, in the life of the CCJ has not actually been known to, speak softly and walk with a big stick. They have really wielded the judicial power in relation to shortcomings by the Barbados court system in appeal cases, stretching out cases too long. I mean, the CCJ has really come no hammer and tongs on Barbados before, and of course there's the case of the Shanique Myrie versus Barbados. So there is that to be said, but we will now wait to see whether this country will answer the court ruling, its own highest court, and have Eddy Ventose registered, and everybody else who says they ought to to be registered. So that's the breaking news that we can bring to you. So thank you for watching. That's your bonus for watching us this day, that the Caribbean Court of Justice has ruled in favor of Eddy Ventose, Professor of Law at the University of West Indies, saying that he has the right to vote and must be registered to vote by 12 o'clock, high noon, on Monday, May 14th. Now, let's look ahead to the week to come, week 2 of the general election campaign, in which the Democratic Labour Party will be hitting the road, or rather the car park, as the DLP poses its case against Mia Mottley again. The title of this meeting, Mia, the People Need Answers. That's tonight at the Carlisle Bay car park, as the DLP continues to press home its argument that Mia Mottley should not be the next Prime Minister of Barbados. And while it has been defending its stewardship and making a case for a third term, and we'll talk a bit about that, we have heard the Prime Minister, Frondell Stewart, praising his ministers for their, as he put it, stellar performance in difficult circumstances. But the Prime Minister has also raised the issue of bloodlines. He did this at the DLP meeting last Sunday. Let's watch.
Her bloodlines spell and portend limitless and boundless opportunities for higher achievement. That appears in quotation marks. Barbados has left that behind years ago. That is a set of capacities that go back to the days of slavery. That doesn't belong to 21st century Barbados. We don't do things nowadays on the basis of bloodline. The Democratic Labour Party came into existence to end all of that.
So, Kristina Hinds, the argument has been made that this could end up being a battle of the bases, that everybody gets turned off. The Barbados Labour Party base will say, well, maybe Mia shouldn't be Prime Minister, and they won't have anything to say about it. The Democratic Labour Party, the argument is being made, might be motivated to make sure that Mia doesn't become Prime Minister. That's the argument on the Democratic Labour Party side. Do you buy that argument?
I don't. I think this is a contest, and each side has to have their own strategy, the way in which they think they're going to get the votes that they require in order to take control of the government. At this point in time, I think it is very important for the Democratic Labour Party to lay out what it intends to do, and to very clearly, if it is serious about recapturing the government, to very clearly let the public know what its achievements have been over the last 5 years and how it intends to build on those over the next 5 years.
You've seen some of that defense of the record of the Democratic Labour Party.
I have. As I mentioned to you previously, Ronald Jones, for instance, noted some of the expansion in the education system, the addition of 6 forms to secondary schools, which allow for a wider cross-section of Barbadian youth to have access to higher levels of education that they would not previously have accessed. Mr. Estwick also pointed out the new Barbados Water Authority building and some of the efficiencies that might offer as one of the contributions. But I think there needs to be a much clearer message if they're planning to use this strategy, because at this point in time, I think that there's a lot of focus on the economy, on downgrades, on the central bank governors, discussion of foreign reserves, and if they want to take some attention away from that, they need to be a lot clearer in the messages that they send. And I think at this point in time, the Barbados Labour Party is a lot clearer, and believe it or not, some of the third parties are a lot clearer too, even though their chances are marginal at best.
Dean Sahel, if you were doing campaign advice for the folks in George Street, what would you tell them then, based on what you just heard from Kristina?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. So one of the things that I find most fascinating about this campaign is that they've all almost taken the position, as it were, of what you would expect the opposition to do. So they're attacking the opposition leader and telling you why she ought not to be Prime Minister. I'm not sure, and my memory really struggles to find a similar situation in past elections. Obviously, yes, you would always have the opposition saying, hey, we need this guy moved. But I don't recall, somebody attacking Point Arthur as an opposition leader and providing reasons why he ought not to be prime minister, for example. And I think that, to me, has given up a lot of strategic ground for the Democratic Labour Party, because it's almost like they're really trying to play catch up. They've already almost accepted that, okay, so this person is almost like if they're destined to be, and now we have to rally our forces to take them down from that position. And I think it's a very strange strategy at best.
Again, that very fast ZR, and head now over from George Street to Robert Street. And what do you say to them? Keep quiet, say nothing, do nothing?
Pretty much do what they're doing. I think their main job now is, and again, I think you have to recognize that the job, I guess, started like way back in January. So their campaign is probably in a totally different advanced state. But they pretty much just have to do what they're doing, and then perhaps just make sure that on the day of the election itself that they have, it's great to have all the rhetoric, but you now need to have what I call the ground game, and just make sure that the people that, you've canvassed and who have said that they will support you actually come out and vote. You won't know if they've voted for you or against you, but at least you can be sure that they've come out and vote. And I think that's, again, you get that sense when you compare all of the different sides, that this Barbados Labour Party is really quite unlike even other BLP campaigns of the past, where it just seems to be so well-oiled. And I actually quite look forward to seeing what they actually do on the election day itself, because that will be the defining moment, I think.
So as we get ready to leave you on this election watch in our remaining moments, let me ask you for your prospects for the week ahead of campaigning. First you, Dr. Kristina Hinds.
Thank you. Next week, or this week rather, I would like to see, as I mentioned, a clear message from the Democratic Labour Party. I would like to hear what they're proposing for the next 5 years.
A manifesto would help.
A manifesto, as well as clear message, because the manifesto is very dense. So people who are not going to read the manifesto, and that's a lot of people, need to hear what is in that manifesto, the key points from the manifesto. I think that's very critical at this point in time. We're just over a week away from the election.
Yeah, and again, I think this week is basically, as it were, moving week for the Democratic Labour Party. I think they do have to put something on the table so that, again, right now the debate is all about the policies of the Barbados Labour Party. Something needs to get on the table so that we can focus some discussion around what the DLP plans.
You look forward to the manifesto, or you really think that people don't set great store by manifestos anyway, and they just want to go out and gather some dew and listen to what the political parties have to say?
No, I think it's an important moment in the campaign. I mean, most of the people will probably not read a whole lot of it, but it just creates another event around which to galvanize support. And I think that that's important, because, even DLP, at least perceived DLP supporters, have basically been a little bit critical of the campaign, aspects of the campaign up to this point. They've not been necessarily coming out in the same numbers and so on. So they need to have this big event that pulls and galvanizes their people.
All right, 10 seconds. Voter apathy, is it there, growing, or diminishing?
I think it's there. I don't know that it's diminishing, but I can't say that it is growing.
All right, Dean?
Yeah, there. I'm not sure if it's growing or diminishing, but it's definitely there.
All right. So what we can expect the political parties to do to diminish that voter apathy and get people to the polling booth is the subject of the next program of Election Watch, as we will be reviewing the week that you are about to experience. Dr. Kristina Hinds of the University of the West Indies, Dean St. Hill, many thanks. So we'll have to leave it there for the moment. And this has been BT's Election Watch. We want you to stay locked on to all of our campaign platforms. No manifestos need apply. Our media platforms. That's our Facebook, facebook.com/Barbados Today, and of course on the web at barbadostoday.bb. I'm Julius Gittens. And until next week, mind how you go.